Do that. All right. We are now recording.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. Welcome. My name is Bridget Ryan. I'm a test prep professional. I have been teaching for Kaplan for 27 years now. So since I was your age, pretty much. GRE is nearest and dearest to my heart because it's where I started. And I look forward to hopefully calming some of your fears. Some of you are testing very soon and others not long after. So it's like anything we can do to try and help answer your questions, just tell you like things that you can be doing to prepare. I congratulate you for your interest. These are wonderful majors that you're looking at. And I'm so impressed at how many PhD programs people are interested in. I think that's really awesome because we need really good teachers and research scientists, especially these days. So let's just start. I'm going to share my screen. I know I was talking with Colleen, and a lot of you have questions about what's new for the GRE for COVID. And you actually have two ways to take the GRE now. And let me just bring this up. So you all should be familiar with the ets.org or GRS or GRE.org website. But the coronavirus, because of the coronavirus, you can take it in person. And I just checked today, there's plenty of scheduling availability in Orlando. The testing center is over in Maitland, so you would go over there to take your test. They do have procedures here, and I will also give these links to Colleen to send out with a follow-up email. But they have the procedures here for what you need to do if you want to take it in person. The obvious masks, you can bring gloves. Because of security, there's things you can and can't bring, so you definitely want to look at what those things are beforehand, and they will make sure that you know those. But also, I wanted to point out here that you can take the GRE test at home, which is kind of an exciting option for people. It is exactly the same as what you will see on test day. It's just proctored at home by a company called ProctorU. And I do want to be honest with you about ProctorU. Sometimes students are dismayed at how long it takes to kind of get the security measures in place before they take their test. So I'd like you to be aware that it can take time for them to have you check the room. You have to have the camera. Sometimes they ask for a hand mirror where they ask you to, show that like basically someone like me isn't sitting on the floor next to you whispering answers to you or anything like that. So it can be a little bit disconcerting, especially if you're like ready to go when at the time of your test appointment to get started on your exam. And also there's some medical conditions that, it will affect if they're, planning, if they're hypoglycemic or whatever, and they're planning on eating at certain times to keep their energy up during the exam. So there are some considerations that you should look into, but just know that it can take somewhere between a half hour and like 45 minutes sometimes to get you set up with the proctor. And they will be watching you take your test. They're recording it. There's an algorithm that they use to watch like things like eye movement to make sure that everything is secure. And of course, that's in your best interest because you don't want anyone to get an unfair advantage on test day. So, but it's a really nice way to be able to take the test at home. This summer, I've learned a lot of pitfalls of testing at home. So you want to make sure that you have family or roommates that are going to work with you on, give you the space and the respect that you deserve to take your exam in a quiet environment. Some people are surprised or forget like that the doorbell might ring or that the dog might bark or, different interruptions that you wouldn't normally think of during an exam that you have to think of when you're at home. So I'm sure you all have plenty of people who are dying to help you along your way. And it's like, this is a good chance to have someone just sit in your living room and make sure no one rings the door, like just watch or something to make sure no one comes to the door. Or if you have like an office that you can take it in where you're more isolated, that's a good idea too. But just be aware that just because you're at home doesn't necessarily mean that you have the perfect testing environment. You have to make that happen for yourself. okay? They do take, you will, like if you have any disability accommodations, those will be the same for you at home as they would be at the test center, okay? I do have some bad news, and some of the PhD programs that I saw may ask for subject test scores. I don't know if you know that about your admissions process or not, but certain ones, like a lot of times psych, might ask for the GRE subject test in psychology. And those are not going to be administered again until I think April. You can see here, April 2021. Okay, so you have to consider what that means for your admissions, for your, you know, portfolio. Of course, I'm sure all of the departments know that this is the case, so there will be accommodations made for that kind of thing. We're all in new territory here, and what I've found is the schools have been excellent about being flexible with students and giving them options for waiving certain things. But it is up to the individual school. So you need to make sure that you are in contact with the school, especially at the PhD level. You know, you should be in close contact with them in the sense that you're asking questions and finding out what the needs are, investigating professors that you might want to work with. I just went through this process with my oldest son, and it's always a really good idea for you to think of or investigate the faculty at the departments that you're interested in and see what kinds of research is being done. Certainly, I'm sure they would welcome new kinds of research. But if you have an interest in association with something that another professor is doing, that's always a good thing to capitalize on. So in other words, you might want to email the professor and talk about your research interests, and you know, maybe you can establish a better relationship that might help you with your admissions there. Who knows, maybe they have a project that you're perfect for. You just never know until you ask, okay? So like I said, I'm gonna be sending this off to Colleen, this page, but you may have already seen this. You know, you definitely should keep in contact with the webpage. It was just updated on September 1st. But I mean, they've been updating it all summer. So as things change, as things open, you know, there may be updates. But if you register for an at-home test, they will, you know, follow through and let you take it at home. They're not going to change the dates on you and make you go into a center if that's your desire. Okay. So does anyone have any question about registering or about the home test, like how it works at home or in person? If you came in late, the tests are identical. They haven't changed anything about the format. You'll still have the 5 sections, and then the writing samples at the beginning, or the essays at the beginning. So it's identical to what you'll see in the facility. Okay.
We have a question that says, how early should I register for the GRE?
Okay, so that's a really good question. Usually what I would like for my students to do is to kind of figure out when they want to apply. A lot of programs have strict deadlines. The more competitive the program, the stricter the deadline, of course. So you can take the GRE once every 21 days. And usually I like people to have at least 2 opportunities to take the test before they submit their application, so everything kind of goes in together. Of course, we don't plan to fail, but sometimes the first experience isn't as ideal as you would like. Maybe your expectations were different and things, your score ends up, you feel like your score is affected by whatever happened during the test. Some people just need to get one under their belt. They've built it up so much in their minds that it's, you know, they aren't able to do their best. They're kind of in their own way because of the anxiety. And so once they have seen what the process is, they do a lot better on the second exam. So I would back out your first test date to, like, let's say you want to apply by November 15th. You would want to take your first test somewhere like maybe a month earlier, so you have another opportunity if you needed to take the test before you submit your application. Okay, so like I said, we don't plan to fail, right? We want to make sure we're prepared when we walk in. And, you know, if you're taking the test at home, there's actually practice tests that ETS provides that you can use to kind of simulate the whole experience. But especially with the proctoring now, you know, at the test center, you're also proctored by video. So that's nothing new, but there just seems to be something different about the procedure when you're at home that seems to throw people, you know, like they're expecting to start earlier than they thought they would, and or they end up starting later than they thought they would. And you know, you might want to give yourself that chance if you need it, not cut it too close.
We
Okay.
have another question that says, how long are test results considered valid?
5 years. They're actually considered valid for 5 years. So I don't know, you know, how many freshmen we have, but it's like, honestly, I think, you know, taking the test as soon as you can before you lose all that work that you did for your SATs. If you're planning on going to school right after you get out of your undergrad, it might not be a bad idea for younger students to plan on taking their GRE early, because a lot of the math is exactly the same as what you saw on your SATs. And many people feel like they lose that through 4 years of college. They don't take a lot of math classes for certain majors, or they take very high level math classes that aren't tested here. And so the sooner you take it, the better, in my opinion, you know what I mean, to capitalize on the knowledge that you already have. Okay, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the individual sections. What else? Any other questions about registering?
Someone just asked, so you get the results relatively quickly?
Yes, you do get them quickly. So you'll get your results immediately, right? Except for the writing scores, but they'll be unofficial, and then 7 to 10 days, business days it takes, but it's usually within a week's time or so. Okay. Any other
And
ones?
then we have one more question. They're coming in slowly, like a nice pace. It's super great for me. This one says, can setting up the Proctor U at home cut into your testing time, or does the test start once everything is set up and the test might just start later than expected time?
Yes, that's exactly what happens. The test will start later than you expected. And so it will never cut into your testing time. Your appointment, when you set up your appointment, that starts the time with the proctor. And they say it can take about a half hour to get everything set up, make sure your camera works and all that. But it will not cut into your full exam time, regardless of how long it takes. But you can see that that will add to the experience, because it's already, stamina is already a huge part of the exam. So, you know, obviously adding 45 minutes or an hour to the beginning of it before you even start anything can affect your, you know, you get yourself all pumped up to take the test, and then you have to sit there and fiddle around with things for a while. So that can be disappointing, but not if you expect it. You know, if you expect it, then there's no problem, you know, so. What other questions do you have about registration or COVID at home?
That's it so far, unless something else pops up,
Okay.
I'll let you know.
Sure, thank you. So, I mean, please ask your questions at any time, even if we've gone past the topic. I want to make sure that you guys understand, you know, that I'm here to help you feel ready. So if you think of something, don't hesitate to put it up in the chat. All right, so I want to jump to how the test works. I don't know, can we get like a thumbs up if you've taken a GRE before, even a practice one? So in your, there's, they call them reactions at the bottom of your screen. If you can give me a thumbs up and I can see who's taken a test before. Just one person. 2, 3. Wow, there's a lot of people here. Okay. So some of you have and some of you haven't. For those that have, you will probably know most of this, but I wanted to go through, again, this is the information that ETS gives you. There's a wealth of information at this site. Every student who takes the test should definitely spend time using the information that they've given you to prepare yourself for the exam, okay? So the general test structure here, you can see that there are 2 analytical writing essays, okay, that you will be writing. These are always at the beginning of the section, okay? They're always at the beginning of the section. So if you have been busy taking, you know, multiple choice sections to get yourself ready, remember that it's one thing to take multiple choice sections by themselves or even in conjunction with each other, you know, 5 in a row like what you're going to see on test day. It's quite another thing to take them after you've written 2 essays for 30 minutes each. Okay, so you want to make
We have a
sure.
question.
Sure.
It says, how long should the essays be?
Oh, how long should the essays be? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but like 3 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs. I want to talk about the structure of each of them. So just so you know the structure, you will take these 2 essays first, and we'll talk in more detail about those in a second. Then you'll take the 5 multiple choice sections, and those 5 sections will be 2 scored verbal sections and 2 scored quantitative sections. There will also be an unscored experimental section somewhere in there, and there may be a research section instead of the unscored section, okay? The research section is always at the end. Sometimes they even give you the option if you want to stick around for a 6th section. I wonder how often that really happens. Probably not often. So the first, for the analytical writing, I want you to see on this page, I'm really happy to be able to show you this. You can see that here there's test content. And if we click on that, you'll see that they talk about the analytical writing section. And then you're going to learn about the verbal section and the quant section. Obviously, we don't have time to go through all of those things today. I'm going to give you the highlights and where things are located so you can go further into detail in your preparation for them. Okay. One quick thing I did want to talk about at the bottom here. The test design features for the digital format, like I said, they're identical whether you're at home or whether you're in the test center. But you will always have preview and review capabilities within a section, so you can go back and forth, okay? You will be able to mark questions and review them later, so you can tag questions, so you can skip past things and return to them later when you have time remaining. You will have the ability to change or edit answers within a section, and that is at any time within the 30-minute window for that section. So let's say you were thinking about a question and you put a certain answer, and then later you have a question in your mind and you go back, you'll be able to change your answer. So it's not a one and done thing. And then you'll have an on-screen calculator for the quantitative reading section or reasoning section. I do want to say I encourage you to practice using that calculator. I know how dependent we all are on our phones, and we just automatically go for our phone when we practice. But it does add to the process to bring up the calculator, to negotiate moving it, right? So where it's useful, and then to be able to use the features. Sometimes you have to click more than once to get it to take, you know what I mean, because the mouse. So I think it's a good idea for you to include that as part of your prep when you're doing section management for quantitative. Okay, always use the on-screen calculator. Okay.
We have another question.
Sure.
It says, is it better to guess on a question you don't know or leave it blank?
Okay, that's a really great question. There is no wrong answer penalty on the GRE, so you should put a guess answer. And in fact, when we talk about this mark feature that you have available to you, anytime you skip a question, we would want you to put a guess answer and then mark it, okay, and then move to the next question. When we get into the timing, right, you only have 30 minutes for 20 questions on both section types. And so you have to keep yourself moving. You don't want to miss out on 4 questions later because you spent so much time on an earlier question, okay? Usually that's a function of you guys being so ambitious that you want to go on to grad school, right? And you know you could get it if you just stick with it. And of course, that's faulty logic for this kind of timed test, because no question is worth more than about 2 minutes. That would be about the maximum, because then you're eating into time for future points, which you know, of course, don't want to do. You want to be able to get all the easy points as you can, okay? So, so did I answer that question? Okay, great. Any other questions about the functionality that you have? Sometimes people ask me during for the writing, do they have, you know, a grammar review, or do they have a spelling check? And the answer is no. You will have cut, copy, and paste. Okay, so for your the features that you'll have for the writing are just cut, copy, and paste. Okay, and this is one of the links. I'll show you several links, and of course I'll send them to Colleen to send off to you guys about the free practice full tests here. There are 2 free practice tests available to you through ETS. Everybody should see both of them, okay? They're free, they're from the test maker. They're the best information that's out there. Regardless of what other prep you're using, this is the real deal from the test maker. So you wanna make sure that you see both of those exams before you test, okay? All right.
We do have a question.
Oh, sure.
It says, is there a specific book on top of free practice that people can purchase to study from as well?
There is a free, well, it's not a free book. There is a book that you can buy from ETS. And of course, you probably have all seen it like Barnes & Noble or Amazon or wherever you shop for books. There are lots of materials out there for GRE prep, okay? Like I said, I've worked for Kaplan for years. We have excellent resources, but those are all paid features. So you wanna definitely capitalize on all the free things that you can do first. Some people can't afford, the kind of prep that's out there. So I wanna give you guys options today. I'm not here as a Kaplan rep, I'm here as myself, just giving you guys options for what you can do for yourself to, maximize your free opportunities for preparation. Okay, certainly we can talk later about looking into other things that would add to it. One other thing, ETS does make a book. You can see it probably under prepare for the test on the left banner here if you want to look at that later. They do have a book. It's the same, it's got a lot of the content in it and it does have some practice, but it's a book and you guys are taking a digital test. I'm not saying it's not worthwhile, but pretty much all books are going to be the same at that. It doesn't matter whether it's ETS or someone else at that point if you're just practicing drills, you know what I mean? So, but definitely these full-length tests I think are worthwhile for seeing, and I'll show you some other features as well, okay?
We have one more question that says, are there specific prompts for the analytical writing section or are they random?
No, they're not random at all. That was going to be the next step here. So I do want to show you the all of the possible prompts that you can see on test day are actually published for you guys. So let's go find that under test contents. And I will go to analytical writing question types. And these give you, there's so much good information here about what the test maker's expectations are for you from these essays. A lot of students never even read this stuff. So you should really spend some time exploring ETS, but you can see there's 2 types of tasks that you will see, 2 essays that you will be writing. One is analyze an issue, okay? The issue essay is the same essay that you've been writing your whole life, especially if you went to school in Florida. We've all done those assessments every year since 2nd grade or whatever. But basically they're going to give you a topic and there's you agree or you disagree and you create an argument agreeing or disagreeing with the prompt, okay? So there is no right or wrong answer for those, but what you're being judged on at the GRE level is the quality of your argument, okay? So you do need to write an essay that is strongly supported by by evidence that you provide, okay? You can see here some sample analysis of issue tasks as I scroll down, right? And then they actually give you samples for the argument. I'm just going to leave it here for a minute, but does anyone have any questions specifically about what you would be doing for the analyze an issue task?
There's a question that says, how are the writing portions calculated into our grades?
Oh, that's a really good question
Or
too.
scores?
Yeah, they're separated. They are separated. So they're not part of the 130 to 170 score that you get for the quantitative and for the math. They're scored from 1 to 6, basically. Your essays will be graded twice, and then those grades will be averaged. One will be, you'll be graded by 1 human, and then the algorithm that they use. If the 2 scores, like between the algorithm and the human, differ by more than a point, they'll bring in another human to grade it to make sure that, what the big discrepancy was between the two scores. So it's from 1 to 6. And really, on both essays, your job is to get above a 4. The threshold between a 3 and a 4 is to basically follow the directions and express yourself clearly, okay? So anyone who doesn't follow the directions or achieve the task will get anything from a 3 down. Anyone who does, follow the directions and provides a solid argument will get a 4, 5, or 6, okay? So that's the dividing line that you want to start with. And of course, the two things that will take you from a 4 to a 5 and from a 5 to a 6 are going to be depth of discussion, which I'll talk about more in a second, and then also style, which is going to include things like sentence structure, organization, vocab, depth of, and then of course with the depth that will give them, you'll get a higher score than a 4 then, okay? I mean, literally, if you have a basic command of English and you follow the directions, there should be no reason that you don't get a 4, okay? So the goal should be to get yourself higher and higher. And I saw some technical people out there. Does the essay matter to you guys? I hope you're at home nodding your head. Yes, it does. Sometimes engineering is the major that actually requires the writing. Like, you would be surprised who requires the writing, and they all of you are looking for grad school, you know what I mean? So it's like you're going to be hopefully communicating your research in some form or another as you move forward in your career. So it's very important that you know how to express yourself in these ways. Okay.
So we have a few more questions. One is, what do you mean by evidence to support if we can't cite sources?
You have got to support your thoughts. So it's like, I'll show you an example, but you have to back up your thoughts. Now, they're not giving you evidence like you saw in SAT, where they gave you something to read and then you had to answer a question about that specific piece of text. You're absolutely right. You're kind of like out there in the wind. But you can use examples from history. You can use current events. You can even make up examples and use hypothetical examples, okay? So you do need to support your ideas by backing them up with solid evidence that you...
Question says, are they... Oh. Sorry, I think my internet is going in and out.
Oh, that's okay.
Another question says, are they looking for introduction and conclusion paragraphs? You might be able to go over this a little bit later when you show an example.
Yeah. Well, let me just show you for the analyze an issue, since we have it here on screen. Like, you can see at the bottom where it says sample analyze an issue tasks. This is an example here. Let me just highlight that if I can. Hold on. So as people rely more and more on technology to solve problems, the ability of humans to think for themselves will surely deteriorate. So you want to write a response in which you discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the statement and explain your reasoning for the position you take, developing and supporting your position. You should consider ways in which the statement might or might not hold true and explain how these considerations shape your position, okay? So that's a lot to do in the essay, right? Definitely a lot to do. And let me get a different pen here. I'll just kind of write a format that I think is useful for students on the issue. The first thing you want to do, I think you do need an introductory paragraph. It should show that you understand both sides of the statement. So show you understand both sides. And then you probably would end that paragraph with your thesis. So plus then thesis. So some people would say blah, 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 blah. However, humans are, bound to lose their ability to think for themselves if that's the way you're going, okay? Now, of course, you can't just say that and think that's enough. You have to support it. And so I would recommend that you have at least 2 paragraphs of support. And if you have time, 3 paragraphs of support. I was an English major undergrad, so I love the 5-paragraph essay format. It's the strongest, but sometimes for time, you may not have time for the 4th or for the 3rd leg of the stool. You know what I mean? For the support there. But these 2 at least have to be well-developed supports for your thesis, okay? And then the last paragraph, whether it's 4 or 5 for you, I'll just say it's 5 here. The last paragraph would be a short wrap-up that kind of brings it home to the conclusion. Now you will read things where people say, oh, that conclusion statement can go at the end of the 2nd paragraph or the 3rd paragraph of support, you know, but it doesn't take much to hit enter and make it its own little wrap up. So it's individualized, okay? They do like for your essays to be standalone documents, right? And of course, you're writing for, regardless of what you read, even on the ETS website, when you read the essays, 3rd person is preferred. Okay, so what does 3rd person mean? No I, no you, and no we. Okay, so you want to keep your personal, we know what you think because you're writing it, right? So there's no need to announce that. And of course, the writing that you're going to be doing in grad school is going to be in 3rd person. You're never going to present and at a conference and say, I think this, right? You're going to present your findings in a formal way. So this is a good opportunity for you to get some practice doing that, okay? And you can see the second, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, there is a question that asks, how long should each paragraph be?
Well, I mean, it should be enough to achieve the goal, the purpose of that paragraph. So it's like, I know people want to hear 5 sentences, right? But that's not always true. Like for your body text, where you guys are supporting your thesis, you know, people will lose the ability to think for themselves because of, you know, X. And then you're going to want to explain why that's true and maybe even give an example to show how that's true, and then maybe reiterate that statement. So that would be an example for a paragraph. That might be 3 sentences, it might be 5. It just depends on how much support you're putting in there. Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay. So you can see the second example here underneath.
There actually is a question, sorry.
Oh, okay.
It says, would you suggest a counter argument paragraph?
That's a good idea. In the first paragraph, you're showing you understand both sides, and that might be part of your last paragraph to say that, you know, some people would say blah, 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 you know, that the opposite. And they might even be some compelling reasons for that you even acknowledge and dismiss. A good mindset for the issue task is to pretend you're writing a closing argument in a courtroom, right? At the end of the trial, everybody knows everything, right? It's all on the table. So you are making your best pitch to the jury for your side, okay? But that doesn't mean that you should ignore any obvious weaknesses of your side. It is better for you to acknowledge the weaknesses of whatever way you're arguing for and dismiss them. So it's true, this, you know, people will adapt and, you know, blah, 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 but then you have to bring it back home to your side, okay? So you need to acknowledge and dismiss your weaknesses, but on the other side of the coin, you do need to acknowledge and dismiss their strengths, right? You can't just ignore that there's a compelling argument for the other side. So that would be part of, you can introduce it in the first paragraph and then wrap it up in the 5th paragraph. If you want this 4th paragraph to be devoted to the other side, like arguing against the other side, you could do it that way as well, okay? There's not a set format that they're looking for. They're looking for a cogent argument, really, which means clear, well expressed, okay? Any other ones? Oh, Colleen, I think you froze. So I'll try and open this. Okay, so you guys know where this stuff is. Let me clear this out. And then I would like to go to Colleen, are there any other questions? Your audio is cutting out. So I'm just going to go on to analyze an argument here. So for the analyze an argument task, you're basically, it says it assesses your ability to understand. Let me get that highlighter back. So to understand, analyze, and evaluate arguments. So in this case, you'll be given someone else's argument, okay? And it might be a proposal, right? It might be a policy change. It could be a suggestion for something. But basically your job is to assess how did they make their argument, okay? So you want to clearly convey your evaluation in writing. You're going to be given a brief passage where the author makes a case for some course of action or interpretation of events by presenting claims backed by reasons and evidence. Your task is to discuss the logical soundness of the author's case according to the specific instructions by critically examining the line of reasoning and the use of the evidence, okay? So there is a lot of variation in the instructions for analyze an argument task. It is critical that you read those very carefully, because remember, the first thing you are judged on is whether or not you have achieved those objectives that they've given you. So you can see some samples here of what they might ask you. You want to write a response in which you discuss what specific evidence is needed to evaluate the argument and explain how the evidence would weaken or strengthen the argument. So in other words, they may have given you something that's open, right? Like maybe it's a good idea, but maybe it's not. What would you want to know in order to decide whether it's a good idea or not? You know, the second one says, write a response in which you examine the stated and or unstated assumptions of the argument. Be sure to explain how the argument depends on these assumptions and what the implications are if the assumptions prove unwarranted. So in other words, if they give you like a proposal, let's say to build a hotel somewhere, and they did a survey of the residents in the surrounding areas, or they said they were in the surrounding areas, then, you know, and they don't want it to be built, but, you know, the city thinks it's a good idea anyway, okay? You would want to know, who did they talk to? The surrounding areas is pretty vague. Did they talk to the people just immediately around the area where the hotel would go? Are they talking about changing zoning? You know, there's a lot of questions. So this is the case where you get to stand as judge of what would be needed to make the other argument better. Okay, what would you want to know as an informed judge of the argument, whether or not you would buy into it? Okay.
We do have a question about the argument, the analyze an argument essay. They ask, is the essay similar to a rhetorical analysis essay?
Well, I mean, there are lots of, I don't know exactly what you mean by a rhetorical analysis essay, but they're giving you a specific situation of somebody else's argument. And we know at the beginning, because it's an analyze an argument task, that it will be flawed, okay? So your job is to identify the flaws, explain why they're flaws, and say what would be needed to correct those flaws, okay? So you are standing from the outside looking in at this other person's argument, if that answers the question. You can follow up if you would like.
There's one more question that says, so if you're unsatisfied with your score on test day, do you have to send them to schools on that day?
Oh, that's a good question. There's something called Score Select now, and I'll make sure to send that link as well. But you actually can you can pay to get the choice to send whatever scores you want to schools or hide others, okay? So you can wait and see your scores and then decide which scores to send. That's a new feature called Score Select. Okay, so just for the interest of time, because I know this is zipping by so quickly, you can see the sample analysis here at the bottom of the page. The sample analyze an argument task, right? There are a lot of these. These are see at the bottom here, the pool of issue topics. this is the entire list of topics that you might see on test day. So when you get under the information about the general test where it says prepare for the test, under analytical writing, it expands to analyze an issue, analyze an argument, and then the score level descriptions. You can see in the box above also that they have those sample responses, they have a scoring guide, they have a sample issue task. You know, there's lots for you to look at here that will orient you to what you should be doing and writing on test day. But this pool of issue topics, the test that you take will have an essay from this list, okay? So there are lots on this list, too many to write as practice. But what I would encourage you to do is to look through the pool and flag the ones that you think might be challenging for you, okay? You don't necessarily have to write a sample essay. You could write an outline of how you would handle this and maybe kind of develop some examples that might work in a variety of situations that you can call upon or draw upon as you're writing these. There's certain topics for myself, you'll see that as you read these, they kind of fall under these big umbrellas of like privacy and, you know, the notion of technology affecting society and all of that. We were talking before, I wanted to mention about adding depth to your essay. You know, sometimes a way to add depth to your essay isn't just to, you know, give more examples or more reasons. It's maybe to look at it on two levels, like how the prompt would apply to you at your age versus how the prompt would apply to your grandparents. For technology, that's usually a good way to add some depth into your discussion to kind of identify how it affects different people differently, maybe men and women differently. You know, it just depends on how the prompt is read, but that's an easy way to add depth into your discussion, okay?
So going back to the argument essay, there's a question that said, to reiterate, you said identify the flaws, how to correct the flaws, and what else?
Oh, okay. So for the, your job is to, the first paragraph for the analyze an argument essay, I'm just gonna not write it down. I'll actually send out like a format for you guys when I send the stuff. But the first paragraph should show that you recognize what they are concluding, what evidence they provided, and what assumptions they're making. And then you're gonna identify which parts are flawed. The evidence or the assumption have to be flawed. One of those two things, or both of them, or you know, some of them are flawed. Otherwise, you'd have nothing to discuss. So you want to pick the 2 or 3 that you have the most to say about, right? And then in the body text, you're going to identify you know, what the flaw is, why it's a flaw, and what would be needed to rectify the flaw. Okay, so if, for instance, if it was that we talked before about they had survey results, right? If you could maybe suggest that they do a broader survey, right? Or maybe you look at other cities who had the same kind of action, like look at case studies from other, you know, similar locations or whatever. You can make suggestions for what would be needed to resolve the flaw, okay? So people would buy into the argument. And like I said, they have an excellent discussion of it here that you can read. This is the analyze an argument page. So there's one of these for each, analyze an issue and analyze an argument. And then the pool, where is the pool? These are the pool of argument topics. There's fewer of these, but like I said, you might read through them and think, okay, what would I say about this or that? Okay. All right, any other quick questions before we go on to talk about? Okay, so just to show you for verbal reasoning, the question types for verbal reasoning are as follows here. They're reading comprehension, text completion, and sentence equivalence. Text completion and sentence equivalence are basically vocab-based questions, even though they're in context of sentences. So to that regard, I wanted to show you guys, and I'm gonna send the links for these, but on Quizlet, I'm sure all of you have used Quizlet at some point in your life, but one of my students has actually put the Kaplan 500 list on there, and they already put pictures with them. So you can actually find this list. It's free. You can put it on your phone. They have different, games you can play. Like I really like this match game on my phone. They also have tests that you can make. I would recommend that you make them all multiple choice so they model what you're going to see on test day. But this is an excellent way for you to prepare for the vocab. There is no way around it. Everybody needs to prepare for the vocab element of this test. Years ago when they made the switch, they said there was no vocab, or it wasn't a vocab-based test anymore because it was context-driven. Still, you need to know the vocab. So from now on, everything that you read and write and see or hear is fodder for you for vocab that could show up on the GRE. There is no finite list for that vocab, right? They didn't give us 500 words that you have to memorize or anything like that. The dictionary is free reign, but these 500 are the most commonly tested words. They're a really good list, okay? So remember that you don't have to know the exact definition for a word to actually make use of the word. All you're gonna have to do on test day is pull it off of a list of either 3 or 5 answer choices, depending on the question. So another good tool that I will send is the word groups. Somebody's put them out here on Quizlet, so you all have access to them. But word groups are like big umbrellas that lots of words fit under, okay? So like for abbreviated communication, abridge means abbreviated communication, but so does compendium. That falls under the same umbrella. So this is a good way to learn a lot of words fast. If you're under a short amount of time, like some of you are for when your exam is, this would be another good, useful tool for you. Okay, so I'll make sure that you have those later today. And then the text completions, let's just talk about that a little bit more. Text completions can have 1, 2, or 3 blanks in them. Okay, 1, 2, or 3 blanks in them. If it has 1 blank, there will be 5 answer choices. If it has more than 1 blank, there will be 3 answer choices for each blank. Okay, so they give you kind of a shorter pool to pull from when there's multiple blanks. So when you're starting a 3 blank question, you start with 1 in 27 odds. That's part of a math question. But 1 in 27 odds of getting that right if you're just guessing. So it's not necessarily a high yield question. You have to get all of the blanks correct in order to get the point for that question. So I want you to factor that into, it really boils down to, do you know the words or not? Now we already talked about not skipping things. So you would just not, what you wouldn't want to happen is for you to spend a lot of time on a question that you have a high probability of getting wrong in the first place. You wouldn't want to waste that time, okay? Any questions? No questions. Okay, so for sentence equivalence, there are a single sentence, 1 blank, and 6 answer choices. And then you can see they give you tips for answering. But this is very much like what you will see for the text completions, except for it will always have 1 blank. Now there are 6 answer choices. The directions say you have to pick 2 answers that would fill in that blank. And those answers will be synonyms, okay? Very similar in meaning, and not change the meaning of the sentence when you put them in there. Just a little tip, out of the 6, sometimes there's another pair of synonyms that we call strong but wrong synonyms, okay? And just don't pick 2 answers because they're synonyms. You wanna pick 2 answers that are synonyms and that fill in the blank, okay, if that makes sense. So you have some examples here that you can read through later as well, okay? And then let's talk about reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is the most under prepped for part of this test. Most students come to me and they figure, well, they can read, they're almost through college, and they feel like they've got it, but it's like, honestly, there are 10 points that come from the reading comprehension on every verbal section. And you should be able to rely on those points. I agree, you can read, you've gotten through this far in college, right? But you have to learn to read in the way that is, gets points on the GRE, okay? And so taking it seriously and being prepared for the kinds of questions that they're gonna ask. These should be the 10 most reliable points for you out of the verbal section. Face it, the vocab, you're a little bit at the mercy of what shows up that day. Even I am, okay? After all these years, I still see words that are like iffy for me, okay? And I don't say that to like discourage you. Hopefully you'll get all words that you recognize that day, but we just don't know. But we know that you're gonna get 10 reading comp points. And the reading comp points should be the most reliable, like I said, points out of the section for you, okay? So don't be surprised, they are split through the section. The first 6 questions of verbal reasoning are going to be text completions. Then there's gonna be a little section of like 4 or 5 reading comp. And then there's gonna be the 4 sentence equivalents, and then there'll be more reading comprehension at the end, okay? The advice I have for you is to do all the short verbal questions first. Do the text completions and the sentence equivalents. You want it to be fast and furious, you know, of course you wanna do a good job, but it's like, you don't wanna waste a ton of time there. Hopefully you'll be able to get those 10 questions done in about 12 minutes. And then you'll be able to have, you know, 18 minutes or so left for the reading comp, because most people feel like if they have more time, they would do much better on the reading comp, okay? All right, any questions? Okay, so how will you go past that first set of reading comp? You're gonna guess, mark, and move. You will guess, mark, and move. So you'll do the 6 text completions, you'll guess, mark, move through the first reading comp, go to the sentence equivalents, then do the reading comp that's after the sentence equivalents, and then at the end of the section, they'll say, do you want to review your marked questions? And your answer is always yes, and you go back and do those other reading comp questions, okay? But try and bank time from the beginning of the section so you have plenty of time to do well on the reading comprehension, okay? All right, any questions about verbal? All right, let's take a look at the quant section here.
Oh, there is one question.
Sure.
Is it one question at a time on the screen?
It is. It's one question at a time on the screen. Even for the reading, when you have multiple questions for a reading comp passage, the passage will stay fixed on the left and you'll have to scroll. There's a scroll bar in the middle of the screen that separates the passage from the questions. The questions will appear one at a time on the right-hand side of the screen. Okay. All right, so for math covers arithmetic, algebra, and geometry, and statistics, of course. Data analysis, they call it in general. That includes graphs and things like that. I would just like to point out to you that you can't do geometry without doing algebra, and you can't do algebra without doing arithmetic. So really the most important part of this test is the arithmetic, right? You have to close the deal. The number one reason that I see students, you know, like once they've done their base review of, you know, exponent rules and things like that, the number one problem that students have is making sure that they're answering the right question. So make sure you are reading carefully. Critical reasoning or critical reading is the most important skill on the test, even for the math section. You can solve for X, but if they're asking for X plus 4, you're never going to get the point, right? Even though you know all the math. So make sure that you are careful with what they are asking for, okay? There is an excellent math review that you will see right here. I'll just bring it up. It's a PDF. It's free to everybody. This is an excellent review, and it has sample exercises in here for going all the way back to like, what is an integer? Do not underestimate the stuff you learned in 3rd grade. It shows up and is very helpful, like least common multiple, prime factorizations. Those kinds of things are super helpful on the test, okay? You guys are very tied to your calculators, and I've grown to accept that, you know, which is, you know, it can be very helpful, but some of the questions are designed to where the calculator can make things harder rather than easier. So make sure that you're considering like using the fractions that they gave you or whatever, okay? Let's see here. As far as the types, I think the conventions, there are some conventions here, symbols and things that you can use. I forget where that is. It's somewhere in here. Oh, at the bottom of this bullet list, the mathematical conventions you can look at. But remember, all numbers used are real numbers, so there's no imaginary numbers on the test. All figures are assumed to lie in a plane unless they indicate otherwise. This is the really critical one though. Geometric figures such as lines, circles, triangles, and quadrilaterals are not necessarily drawn to scale. You need a mathematical reason, right, to think that something is a right angle. They have to tell you in some form, okay? Remember that coordinate systems are drawn to scale, but sometimes they shift the scales from the X to the Y. Like the X might be in ones, but the Y scale might be in tens. Pay attention to getting used to the drawing that you have in front of you, okay? The question types that you're gonna see, and we only have a few more minutes, but basically you're gonna see problem solving questions, which are multiple choice. You'll see quantitative comparisons, which is probably the most unique format question to the GRE. And then there'll be numeric entry questions, which are, from SATs as grid-ins, okay, where you type in an answer. One very nice feature about your grid-ins or your numeric entry questions is that on the calculator that they give you, there is a transfer display button. So like if they're looking for a, like a decimal, instead of having to write down your answer and then type it back in, you can just hit transfer display and it will translate your answer right into the box, which is really a nice reason to use your calculator on one of those questions, so you don't have to worry about transposing numbers or anything like that, okay? I want to talk a little bit about quantitative comparisons. Oh, let me just say this other thing here too, sorry, about the problem solving. Sometimes you'll be selecting one answer, and in those cases, the bubbles are ovals, right? So when there is an oval next to the question, the answer choice, that means you're picking one. If there are boxes next to the answer choices, that means that more than one may apply. So you can pick from one all the way up to all of the choices, okay? So if there are boxes, more than one may apply. Make sure that you're not so like into the test that you forget about the instructions that are available to you at the top of the page, okay? Make sure that you're answering the question, and in the practice, you'll see a lot of those. Also, there'll be one data interpretation set in each set of 20 questions. Usually that's a set of graphs that they give you that you have to kind of assimilate yourself to. And then there will be 3 questions associated with those. Typically, the first 2 questions are more like read them off the chart kind of questions, and the last one is more calculation driven. So if you're choosing in time, try and at least get the first 2 done on that set, okay? Quantitative comparison questions, I'm hoping they have one here that I can just show you. Basically, they're giving you 2 columns of information, and you're asked to choose which one is bigger. So they'll look like this number 1 here, right? You'll choose quantity A if it's bigger, and they mean always bigger, okay? Choose quantity B if B is always bigger. Choose C if they're always equal, or choose D if sometimes one is bigger and sometimes the other is bigger, okay? Any information that appears in the center, like here for number 2, it's not really in the center, but Lionel is younger than Maria, right? So that's something that applies to both columns. So you have to remember that sometimes they'll give you like information, but it applies to both columns, okay? There was one other thing I wanted to say about the test in this last minute that we have, and then I can stick around for questions if you guys can. The test is adaptive at the section level, not at the question level, okay? So when you get your first scored section of quant or a verbal, it will be a medium level of difficulty. And based on how you do in that section, you will be given another section that is either low, medium, or high based on your performance on that first section. It is obviously in your best interest to get to the high level section. Some students don't believe that. They think that if they get to that high level section, they're not going to get any of those right, and then their score is going to suffer. When you achieve the high level section for your second scored section, there's a certain floor that your score can't drop beneath because of the achievement that you made on the first section, okay? So always try to get to that high level section. Obviously, the more you get right there, the better your score is. But it's like, if you don't get to the high level section and you get to another medium level, that means there's going to be a certain ceiling that your score can't go beyond because of the achievement that you didn't make on that first section, okay? So you're always shooting for the highest level sections that you can, okay? And I wish I could give you an idea, like an exact idea of how many you need right on that first medium section to get to the high level section. But it looks like from experience that the magic number is somewhere around 15. Okay, if you can get 15, 75% of your questions, you should be able to get to that high level section for the second one. Okay. So that should be your goal, right? Let's get for 15 or better on that first medium level section for both verbal and for quant, okay? And then, you know, then start working on higher level questions so you can get more and more of that high level section correctly. So I'm sorry it was a mad rush. It always is. I want to answer all your questions. So like I say, I'll stick around, or if you can't stick around, maybe send an email. And we can answer them by email for you. So Colleen, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. We actually have, I believe, a workshop assessment. I might be incorrect here. I think it is this tiny URL. I also put in aap.ucf.edu. If one of you are looking for, if one of you is looking for, I guess, a signature on a workshop form, then please send it to aap.ucf.edu. Or if you have questions for Bridget and you have to head out, please go ahead and just send those emails, those questions to the email aap.ucf.edu, and I will make sure that Bridget gets them. And then after that, we now have questions. I can stop the recording now so everybody can go ahead and turn on their videos and their microphones.